Hi, and today I'll be outlining how I apply a key psychological theory, Ryan and Dessie's self-determined theory, SDT, to support inclusive and holistic skill acquisition in secondary physical education setting. Self-determination theory proposes that human motivation is driven by the satisfaction of three innate psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. When these needs are met, learners are more likely to develop intrinsic motivation, which is essential for sustained engagement and meaningful learning. In physical education, where students are consistently challenged to develop a movement skill, SDT provides a valuable lens for designing learning experiences that are not only technically effective but also emotionally and socially supportive. Drawing on Arnold's concept of learning in, through, and about movement, I aim to move beyond mechanistic or performance-only approaches, ensuring that students are recognized as whole people and not just performance of skill. Let's consider a Year 8 PE lesson focused on developing team-based strategies in a modified game of Ultimate Frisbee. Here's how I would apply each STD principle. Autonomy. To support autonomy, I'll begin the lesson by offering students choice. For example, they can select their own warm-up activities from a scaffold list or co-develop strategies with peers during small-sided games. According to Standage, providing meaningful choices increase intrinsic motivation in PE. I would also use inquiry-based questioning, such as how might your positioning affect your team's success, to encourage decision-making and personal reflection. Competence. Skill acquisition hinges on the student's belief in their ability to succeed. I would implement a progression-based structure, allowing students to build competence through successively more complex activities. Constructive feedback will be framed around effort and strategies rather than outcome. For example, I noticed you used to be space effectively to support your team up, rather than good goal. As Baumeister and Larry, 1995, argue, perceived competence is closely linked to sustained motivation. Relatedness. A sense of belonging is vital. I will create opportunities for peer support and collective problem solving through rotation team roles, encouraging students to give each other positive feedback. Emphasis will be placed on mutual respect and inclusive participation. This aligns with Arnold's philosophy that movement education should foster human flourishing, not just technical skills. By intentionally applying STD in lesson design, we promote not only skill acquisition but also personal growth, social connection, and equitability learning environments. This is crucial in creating a PE space where all students feel safe, capable, and valued regardless of ability level. In summary, integrating self-determination theory into PE practice supports a holistic and inclusive approach to teaching movement. It transforms the lesson from a space of mere physical performance into one of human development, where students learn in, through, and about movement in socially just and personal meaningful ways. Hi, in this presentation I'll discuss how understanding neurology, particularly development coordination disorder or DCD, can be applied to promote inclusive and socially just physical action through skill acquisition and learning through movement. Development coordination disorder is a neurodevelopment condition that affects a child's ability to plan and execute coordination motor skills, which can refer with academic tasks, self-care, and physical activity. In PE settings, students with DCD may struggle with balance, spatial awareness, and fine or gross motor control. often results in frustration, avoidance of physical activity, and social exclusion. As future educator, it is crucial that we do not interpret these challenges as a lack of effort, but instead apply informed, empathetic strategies to foster participation, belonging, and skills development. Informed by Arnold's holistic movement philosophy, learning in, through, and about movement, my approach considers the students as a whole person, not merely a performer of physical skill. By embedding neurology understanding into lesson planning, I aim to reduce barriers and create movements that support diverse development needs. Let me illustrate this through a Year 7 PE lesson focused on fundamental motor skills development, specifically throwing and catching. Here's how I would implement inclusive practices that support students with DCD. Differentiation through task designs. To foster competence and reduce anxiety, I will modify tasks by adjusting equipment. Example, just like using larger or lighter balls. Reducing the complexity of movement patterns and providing options for individual, partner, or group-based practice. This aligns with the principle of Universal Design for Learning, UDL. Ensuring that tasks are accessible without segregating learners. Repetition and consistency in activity setup can also support motor planning and execution. Multisensory instruction and visual cues. Research shows that children with DCD benefit from explicit instruction that integrate visual The aerobic training sequence shown in this video sustains somewhat moderate intensity by jogging and dynamic cardiovascular drills. Demonstrates principles of continuous training designed to improve cardiorespiratory endurance. This aligns with the key psychological adaptations such as increased stroke volume, improved capillary density, and enhanced oxygen uptake. In contrast, video 2 features an aerobic drill including short bursts of movement and high-intensity agility movements. These movements activate fast-twitch muscle fibers and contribute to the development of anaerobic capacity and muscular power, particularly relevant for sports involving repeated high-intensity efforts. Understanding the physiological differences between aerobic and anaerobic systems is vital for designing purposeful movement experience in HPE. By implementing this knowledge into a lesson, I can scaffold student understanding for energy systems, linking movement to real-world physiological process. For example, a circuit-based lesson could have students alternate between aerobic, skipping and jogging, and anaerobic, sprints, plyometric jumps, etc. stations, followed by reflective prompts that prompt them to describe how their body responds differently across activities. However, the application of this knowledge must be inclusive and socially just. Applying the sociocultural approach means recognizing that not all students engage with physical activity from the same background, skill level, or motivational context. Therefore, differentiation is essential. In practice, this will mean offering movement modifications, choice-based activities, and culturally responsive examples that acknowledge students' diverse abilities and identities. For instance, in a unit themed around movement for health, students could relay energy system knowledge to traditional games or physical activities from their own cultural community backgrounds, enhancing relevance and connection. Furthermore, embedding behavioral science principles such as determination theory into lesson planning allows for a more holistic impact, promoting autonomy, competence, and relatedness through goal setting and peer collaboration supports students' sustained motivation and engagement in movement. For example, PE-led warm-ups or student-created fitness circuits could foster ownership of learning, supporting greater engagement with physiological concepts. This integration of biophysical and behavioral science within sociocultural frame highlights the broader education purpose of HPE, not only improving physical skills and health outcomes, but also developing critical, autonomous learners. The use of self-practical footage in this reflection has reinforced the value of experiential learning, both for personal growth as a future teacher and as modern for a classroom practice. Implementing psychological knowledge in PE requires more than scientific understanding. It demands a pedagogical lens that honors inclusivity and sociological diversity. By embedding Arabic and anaerobic training tasks with student-led inquiry, movement choice, and differentiation instruction, we create spaces where all learners can engage meaningfully. This approach not only reflects contemporary HPE values, but also equips students with lifelong skills for health and movement literacy. The observed footage showcases a peer engaging and sequence of overhead throws offered an insightful opportunity to apply biometrical principles in the context of HPE. Through analysis of this performance and reflection on its educational implications, I gained a deeper understanding of how scientific knowledge, particularly biometrics, can support skill acquisition while also reinforcing socially just and inclusive practices in movement-based learning. Biomechanics, defined as the study of human movement using principles from physics and engineering, is vital for understanding how technique, force, motion, and balance interact to influence performance. In the recording throwing sequence, several key biomechanic elements were observed. Firstly, the athlete demonstrated effective sequential segmental coordination, progressing movement from the larger proximal segments, hips and shoulders, to the smaller distal segments, elbow, wrist, and hand. This follows the principle of kinetic chain sequencing, essential for generating maximum force in projectile movement. The preparatory phase showed a stable base of support with a contralateral stance, providing a foundation for forced summation through hip and shoulder rotation. However, during the release phase, there appeared to be slight misalignment in the elbow angle and limited follow-through, suggesting a need to enhance angular velocity at the shoulder and increase a range of motion in the upper limbs. Addressing this in a learning environment could involve targeted drills focusing on trunk rotation, wrist extension, and release timing to optimize the projectile motion, grounded in Newton's law of motion and the conservation of momentum. Applying the biometrical knowledge into PE lessons allows educators not to only improve motor skill proficiency, but also foster students' understanding of why certain movement techniques are more effective than others. For example, students could use slow motion video to analyze peer throwing mechanics and collaboratively identify biometrical errors, engaging in higher order thinking and peer learning. Importantly, this can be differentiated to accommodating varying skill levels. Some students might focus on body position, while others explore angular momentum or lever systems. Embedding these practices within a sociocultural framework ensures movement learning is not solely technical but also inclusive and equitable. Recognizing that students come with diverse physical abilities, cultural backgrounds, and prior movement experiences, educators must ensure biometrical concepts are accessible to all. This could mean using analogies, physical demonstrations, or culturally relevant examples of throwing activities to enhance engagement and relevance. Additionally, creating a psychological safe environment for feedback and peer analysis supports inclusive participation. Students might be hesitant to perform publicly or critique others, so structuring the learning space to prioritize positive construction dialogue is essential. For instance, using anonymized videos or small group stations can reduce performance anxiety and promote equitable contribution. For behavioral science lens, this approach also draws on contrastive learning, where students contrast understanding through active injury and social interaction. When students engage in biomechanical analysis of their peers, they deliver critical thinking, empathy, and a stronger connection to their own movement learning, enhancing both cognitive and affective outcome. In conclusion, biometrics offers more than technical lens for movement. It provides an opportunity for thoughtful, social, conscious teaching in HPE. By analyzing throwing mechanics and applying these findings pedagogically, educators can bridge scientific knowledge with inclusive practice. Such interrogation not only enhances performance but supports the development of movement literature, reflective, and confident learners. Hello, and in this presentation, I'll discuss how I embedded the sociocultural approach into my teaching of human movement, specifically psychology, biometrics, and behavioral science in health and physical education. This approach underpins my commitment to inclusive, meaningful, and socially just learning through movement. The sociocultural approach has emphasized in Module 10 recognize the students' learning shaped by their cultural development, cultural backgrounds, social experiences, and access to opportunity. In HPE, this means acknowledging their diverse movement histories, physical abilities, and perspectives that students bring into the classroom. As such, teaching must extend beyond knowledge delivery. It fosters equality, respect, and inclusivity. When teaching sociology, such as aerobic and anaerobic energy systems, I use contextualized movement experience to make learning relevant. For example, after completing a self-practical exploring energy system, I would design a circuit lesson where students can rotate through aerobic, dancing or skipping, and anaerobic, sprints or shuttle runs, stations. I would also include cultural relevant tasks such as indigenous running games or traditional movement practices. To make physiological learning inclusive and engaging, this ensures that knowledge is applied through movement in ways both accessible and socially meaningful. With biomechanics, which explores forces, motions, and techniques, I apply the sociocultural lens by facilitating peer-based movement analysis. In previous lessons, you can ask students to record and review thrown actions, allowing them to reflect on principles like summation of force and angular velocity. To ensure psychological safety, I structure feedback protocols that encourages positive, respectful dialogue. This approach supports inclusive peer learning while reinforcing scientific understanding. Behavioral science also interacts with this framework. I incorporated the self-determination theory to foster intrinsic motivation by providing students with autonomy and meaningful choice. For example, students can choose from any activity type, pacing, or method of assignment. For example, peer videos, reflection journals, or group analysis, which supports different learning. This honors individual identities and allows for personal goal setting, Key aspects of quality HPE practice. By embedding the sociocultural approach across movement sciences, I avoid deficit thinking and celebrate diversity in classroom. Teaching concepts like energy systems or biomechanics should never be disconnected from students' social and cultural realities. Instead, these disciplines can be powerful tools for fostering not just physical competence, but also critical thinking, collaboration, and identity development. I believe that high-quality HPE requires teaching significant knowledge through sociocultural lens. This promotes learning that is inclusive, responsive, and transformative. It helps students not only improve their movement but also understand and value themselves and others within diverse communities of practice as future educators. This commitment will guide my practice in fostering equitable, evidence-informed HPE classrooms.